It's good to see everybody here this evening. Let's turn to 1 Samuel 21. I'll meet you there in a moment. It's a short chapter, and as has been our practice thus far, we're just going to cover a chapter at a time, and so, you can maybe look forward to a shorter sermon, or maybe not. I don't know, This, I guess a precursor to this, something that you need to know is that there are going to be things in this lesson that I want to bring up tonight, but naturally are going to fall into the Wednesday night class. I got real excited when I found this out. I told Autumn that you're never going to believe what happened. I'm getting through the fourfold gospel, and I've come to Matthew chapter 12, and I just so happen to be teaching from 1 Samuel 21 just before I get to it. And the things that are talked about there are the things discussed tonight. So pay attention tonight, and then come back Wednesday night for the rest of the lesson, because that's where we find it. But let's look at this passage together, starting in verse 1. Now, this whole thing, I think, if you look at this, probably in your Bibles, it's probably going to say David eats the showbread or something like that. That's a big thing that everybody takes from this passage. But the entire chapter is not David eating the showbread. The entire chapter is David is gathering supplies, and that's why we have it titled as such. But where David eats the showbread is right here in the beginning of this passage. And let's look at verses 1 through 6. This is where David is starting to gather some supplies. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech came to meet David trembling, and said to him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed the young men to such and such a place. Now, before we finish up the rest of that section, let's kind of set the tone here. Now, it's probably no surprise to anybody, if anybody has heard anything that's gone on from the palace, that Saul is upset with David. It's reached probably many people at this point, and of course, anybody that was at the New Moon Feast would have seen that Saul got mad at Jonathan for sticking up for David, and so this is probably starting to become some news here. But he comes here to Nob, and Ahimelech comes out, and he sees him, and he came to meet David trembling. And so why is that? We don't get a whole lot of explanation here, but probably because David does not have anybody with him. And if things have gotten out, you're kind of wondering, well, what's David here for? Is David here for trouble? What's going on? And so David comes to meet him, and said to him, so why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David says this, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed the young men to such and such a place. So here's a problem for us. As a Bible student, you look through, and David is called what? He's a man after God's own heart. No, I purposefully did not point this out last week, but what did David do last time, like when we studied? He lied. He said, I'm going to go off, you tell your dad, and he got Jonathan to lie with him. I'm going to go off, tell your dad that I've gone to go and offer a sacrifice with my family. But did David go and offer a sacrifice? Well, no, he didn't. This was a ruse, and so the same thing happens here. He lies again. Now, people want to try to justify this. There's no justification. There's actually no justification for the things that he does right here. He is trying to survive. People have tried to take this and say, kind of prove situational ethics at this point. Well, David's a man after God's own heart. He lies. He does things that he shouldn't, and just to save his life. And so therefore, we can do the same things. Matter of fact, the Jews have made up their own traditions over these things. They have this idea that it's okay to lie if it's to save yours or someone else's life. But it just doesn't make sense. That's just not in the Scriptures. It's always wrong to lie. And then David lies right here. Now, I don't want to jump ahead, but if you want to read ahead, I can't stop you. The next chapter is going to be the result of what happens here. And so David, when he lies, and I think this is why David, again, is called a man after God's own heart. It's not because he does not do anything wrong, but as we'll see in the next chapter, whenever he does something wrong and it's brought to his attention, what does he do? He repents. And that's what's going to happen in the next chapter. So if you want to read ahead, there you go. But David is by himself here. And he says, verse 3, "Now therefore, what is under thy hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or whatsoever there is present." And the priest answered David and said, "There is no common bread under my hand, but there is holy bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women." And so the whole point is, as long as you've not had any physical relations and you're clean, then yes, you can take of this. And David answered the priest and said to him, "Of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days. When I came out, the vessels of the young men were holy, though it was but a common journey. Now, how much more then today shall their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him holy bread, for there was no bread there, but the showbread that was taken from before Jehovah to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. All right, so this bread was not meant for anybody but whom? You know the answer to this. The priests. It was not made for anybody but the priests, and David takes of it. Now, you're going to start kind of having your wheels turning now, because when you go to the New Testament, Jesus points this out. Now, we're going to talk on Wednesday night about what Jesus is actually saying. He is not approving of what David did, but he is making a point, and we'll see that on Wednesday night. But, you know, he partakes of the showbread, and he's not authorized to do that. They kind of come up with a compromise in order for him to partake, but no, he just shouldn't have done this. There are people that want to give all kinds of answers as to why this would have been okay. You really, when you look at the Bible as a whole, there is no good answer. Sometimes people go, well, he's already, David's technically king already, and so well, that doesn't matter. He's not a priest. It doesn't matter, of any of these things. They'll use that to even talk about the lying. Well, the king sent me, and he's talking of himself. No, David has already been caught lying. So we're not going to justify the lie. And then we can't justify here the showbread thing either. And when you get over into the New Testament, that's where, people try to justify the eating of the showbread. But there is really just no justification here. But the whole point here is that David has nowhere to go. He can't go back home. Saul's looking for him. If he goes back home, he's putting his family in danger. He's on the run, so he's got to find some supplies here, and that's what's going on. All right, let's look at the next section here, verses 7 through 9, and seeking a weapon. Now, he's looking for supplies altogether. That includes finding something that he can defend himself with. All right, verse 7. "Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day detained before Jehovah, and his name was Doeg the Edomite, the chiefest of the herdsmen that belonged to Saul." And we're going to find out that from this little verse, there's a lot that goes on. We know from the next chapter that this is going to cause a big problem. This is going to get people killed, as a matter of fact. And David even recognizes this man. We don't see it right here, But whenever all this stuff happens in the next chapter, he says, I knew it. As soon as I saw Doeg, I knew he'd go back and tell Saul. And so he realizes all this stuff. But moving on. So we're going to have a problem with Doeg here in the next chapter. And David said unto Ahimelech, and is there not here under thy hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. I had to leave in a hurry. I couldn't get anything. Do you have any weapons? I think that's kind of an interesting thing to mention. You go, I don't have anything. Do you have anything here? Who's he talking to? He's talking to the priest. Now, maybe he has an idea of what's there, because verse 9. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the vale of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, there is none like that, give it me. So he says, we don't have any weapons here. Now, when you slew Goliath, we have his sword that it's back here. I love how things happen in the Bible like this. There are things that go missing, and they're just sitting in a corner somewhere, And here it is. Here's this sword from Goliath. This is a famous battle. And oh, yeah, we have that sword. It's wrapped up in a cloth. It's behind the ephod. It's just hanging out back there. We don't have anything else. If you want that, that's the only thing we've got. And then David says, well, there's nothing else like it. Give it to me. And of course, when you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 17 and we start talking about the type of armor that Goliath was wearing, we talked a lot, I think, about the weight of it, trying to establish Goliath's might, because he would have been carrying all this stuff and yet had to be very strong to carry it and use these things. But at the same time, it talks about all the different types of metals, which were very expensive, showing that Goliath was not only a formidable warrior because he's obviously defeated people, but he's also very wealthy because he's been able to take in the spoils of war. And so not only is Goliath's sword unique because it's Goliath's, it's also probably rather expensive. And so he says, hey, you give that to me. There's nothing like that. Sure, give it to me. I want that one. So he looks for weapons. He finds a weapon. Let's look at the last part of this chapter, seeking refuge. Verse 10. And David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said unto him, is not this David the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? And David laid up these words in his heart, and was sore afraid of Achish the king of Gath. And he changed his behavior before them, and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servants, Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen, that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? Probably, I would say probably. Not probably. It is my favorite of Shakespeare's classics, and that is Hamlet. You ever read Hamlet? When you read Hamlet, you see an awful lot of David right there. What is the whole purpose of Hamlet? If you've not read Hamlet, I'm about to ruin it for you. It's been around for a long time, so it's not my fault. It's yours if you haven't read it by now, okay? But what he does is he's a prince, and his father dies, and then it's his uncle that has done this. His uncle has killed his father, and so Hamlet starts trying to figure everything out. But he realizes that he's going to have a hard time doing things, just kind of investigating on his own. So he acts crazy. That's the whole plot. He acts crazy throughout the whole thing. He just does some really odd stuff, You remember the whole to be or not to be? That's there. That's Hamlet. He picks up a skull and he's just kind of playing with it as if he's just crazy. That's the whole plot. So anyway, when you look at that and you go, oh, that's an interesting plot. It was already in the Bible. It was already there. David does this. David is over here. He's trying to find some refuge. He goes to Achish. They say, hey, this is David. They recognize him. And then they, I guess, realize the value of David. And David starts to get a little nervous. And so, what does he do? He acts crazy. He acts like he's crazy. And, the events, I don't know how long of a time period this is, but, we had talked about the whole, David being a boy and whatnot at the time of Goliath. And, I'm sure a few years have passed in all of this, but it's kind of funny to mention that, those that think of David as a boy, by the time you get here to 1 Samuel 21, he clearly has a beard. He's got a beard, and he's letting his spit go down. He's drooling all over himself, and it's getting in his beard, and people are just like, this is a madman. This guy's crazy. And then he's going, and he's scratching on things, and he's just, he is doing some weird stuff. And so Achish then says unto his servants, you see that this man is mad. Don't bring me a crazy person. I don't need a crazy person. And so he said, I got plenty of those here. I don't need another one. And so that's all that's going on. He's seeking refuge. And David, of course, when you get to chapter 22 and verse 1, David is going to depart from them and go on to other places. All right, let's make a little bit of application here. Speaking of the things that David did, we mentioned that, David was, he wasn't in the right for some of the things that he did. And here's the point I want to make. Always do the right thing. When you look at the Bible, there are lots of people that take matters into their own hands. Namely, when I think about that, I think about Abraham. Sarah and Abraham, they do this. And they have a child through one of her handmaidens, and it causes problems. Now, we'll never know this unless we could just speak to God directly. Maybe one day we can ask him this. But when you look at this, you kind of wonder, well, what would have happened if they just let it go and let God's judgment happen? Let God do his thing. Trust fully in God and allow for God to provide a child. He does. But before it's like they get impatient and think, well, maybe we got to figure out the details here. Well, let's get this workaround. Let's get Hagar and let's get her involved here. They make up their own thing, and then it causes problems. David here does his own thing, and it's going to cause problems. And that's just all there is to it. When we do the right thing, we may have some problems that follow anyway, but at least we're on the right side with God. The other thing I want to mention is this. Never lie. Never lie. It is not okay to lie. I don't, want to self-promote in any way, but there's a book, that I helped write. I did not write this chapter, so I feel like I can say it. But, in the book that I helped write, there's a chapter on lying, and these things are mentioned where, it's just not okay to lie. It's just not okay. The Bible is replete with all these examples and verses that say don't do it, that to be honest and not to lie, and there's just no justification here, There's no justification. Let me give you a few things, a few verses in conjunction with this. In John 8 and verse 44, it says, Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father it is to do your will to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and standeth not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father thereof. The kids in Bible class right now are learning all about this. And, when you lie, you're being like the devil. And it's just, listen, there are a lot of groups I would want to be in, a lot of people I'd like to hang out with. The devil is not ranked among those people at all. And so, why would you want to be in league with the devil? When you lie, that's exactly what you do. In Ephesians 4 and verse 29, we use this passage a lot when it comes to using foul language, but there's more to it than that. Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth, but such as is good for edifying, as the need may be, that it may give grace to them that hear. And so don't let any corrupt speech come out of your mouth. That could be a lot of different things, right? That's why I mentioned it. It's not just a passage about, saying some kind of a curse word or saying a dirty joke. All those things would make sense and they apply. But think about this. What about lying? Lying is corrupt speech. Let no corrupt speech come out of your mouth, but such that is good for edifying. And then Colossians 3 and verse 9, lie not one to another, seeing that you've put off the old man with his doings. Now, I kind of think that this is going to be the progression of things when you look at David's life. He's still a young man. He's got a lot to learn. And how many of us have made mistakes, right? Every single one of us. We've all made mistakes. Have we grown? Well, hopefully you've grown, right? When you make a mistake, you learn from it and you grow. Listen, David is going to grow. Does he continue to make mistakes? Yes. That's one of the great things about the Bible is that when you look at the Bible, there are people that are exemplified, but they are not sinless people. They have problems. They do the wrong things sometimes. But we're not to look at them for that example. What do we look to them for? When you go over to Hebrews, chapter 11, you're going to find you look to them for all of the things that they did in faith. Look to their good example. As Paul would say, imitate me as I imitate Christ. That's what we're looking for. We are looking for the good examples. And so, brethren, there is a good example that we have in Scripture, and that is for one to become a child of God, you have to hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized in the Christ. And that if you have fallen away, you've been in some kind of error, you can make your way back to the Lord. You can repent of that and be restored. If you are in need of this invitation, if you need to make things right with God, you need some prayers, we're here for you. This is your invitation. Please come as we stand and as we sing.